Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of The Real and the Rare. My name is Scott Morgan-Roth, the Motor City Madmouth. Glad to have the X-Man with me tonight. How you doing?
Doing great, Scott. Great to be on with you, and great to be trying new things here on The Real and the Rare and the WSAN network.
Yeah, not only are we going audio, but we are going video. Glad to have you. I expect us to be the beginning of a lot of better things for us as we have established this broadcast, but now we're going to take it to a new level. What's good about the whole thing is not only we'll be able to visualize it, but these videos will be on YouTube as well. So, all right, what do we got going, Xavier?
Well, first of all, we hope that everyone is continuing to remain vigilant and make all the precautions that they need to take during this time with the COVID-19 pandemic. And also just hope everybody is really enjoying all of the sports that we have that are now coming back. It's definitely been a relief for me being able to have the NBA playoffs every single night this week. It's definitely been something to really take a load off and make you really forget about the other problems that we have going on in the world. But for us Floridians, we do have a problem that is possibly looming for us once again, as it always happens around this time of year, and it is back, and that would be hurricane season. And the latest would actually be Tropical Storm Laura. And ironically enough, Scott, when I talked to you earlier this week about wanting to go ahead and address this topic, I had no idea that two tropical storms were developing in the Gulf right now as we speak. Tropical Storm Laura, which I haven't been able to take a look at the cones in the past hour, but the last time I looked at them, we were looking like we were mostly out of the cone zone for now, but not officially out of danger. Still very awfully close, but it's a lot more encouraging than the way things looked about 10 to 12 hours ago, with Florida mainly being in that cone for the most part. But things are shifting in another direction. Now, we hope and pray that they continue to shift in another direction. Right now, the only part of Florida that appears to be in that cone is the northern Florida, Pensacola area. The storm, if it were to hit right now, would be in the directions of Alabama and Mississippi. And listen, we don't want anybody to get hit by any of these storms, of course,
Right.
because they can cause irreparable damage. Some things can't be repaired. Some lives can be taken. Like you have no idea the impact that this storm could potentially have. But as of right now, most of Florida does appear to be out of harm's way, and that's an encouraging sign. But like I said, I have not checked the cones in the past hour. So I don't know exactly what the changes may look like right now. I don't know the changes that could happen overnight or by in the morning. But Scott, what are just some of the best ways that you can help to, help inform our listeners and our viewers on the best ways that they can prepare themselves for the hurricanes and the tropical storms and just throughout everything that comes with hurricane season? Because you've been in Florida for quite some time now, and I know that this would not be your first rodeo with dealing with these types of storms.
Well, believe it or not, I've been in Florida on 2 occasions as a student at University of South Florida back from 84 to 86. I dealt with a major storm, but I lived in South Florida from 81 to 84, and then 84 to 86 up in the Tampa Bay area. Hurricane Elena really rocked that area, especially Indian Rocks Beach. It was really nasty. But here in South Florida, I returned back in 2002. There have been a myriad of storms, too many to count. But the one thing that people have to do, get your batteries, make sure you have a lot of canned goods, a lot of non-free refrigerated items. Peanut butter is common, crackers are common. Make sure your flashlights are working, your radios, and whatever way you can get some sort of information, you do it. I would also suggest that people, if you have anything in the refrigerator, eat it. If you have it in the freezer, eat it. Okay, you don't want to spend all this money that you spent to buy food and then all of a sudden you lose it because of a power situation or whatever, because that's unfortunate. So canned goods, everybody knows you should get those. You can put things on bread, utensils and whatnot. Have a lot of flashlights, lanterns, things like that. And more importantly, have a sense of humor, because you're going to need that, because everybody's going through the same situation that they can. The one thing I caution people is don't get overly too hyped up with the media. It's their responsibility to inform you as to what's going on, And again, these storms change all the time. You don't know what direction they're going to go from second to second. But you got to take the necessary precautions, and you have got to play it safe any way that you can.
Yeah, I'd like to just go ahead and remind everyone that when we were in a very similar situation to this last year with Hurricane Dorian, which, as we know, absolutely battered and did some horrific damage over in the Bahamas, they're still rebuilding and recovering from some of the damage that took place over there. Florida was very much in the cone zone
Right.
when this storm was still out in the Atlantic and it was developing and it was becoming the monster that it ultimately did become. And just in the latter days, as everyone was preparing to make their preparations and news stations were preparing for all hands on deck type of coverage, most of Florida got out of the cone zone. Now, there was still an area in southeast Florida that did have some rain and heavy winds that occurred there. I believe there may have been some power outages that took place there for a few hours, if not a full day as well. But as we said, these you never know what's going to happen with these cones.
Right.
You never know where the direction of these storms are going to shift. So, as Scott is saying, don't get too hyped up by the media, but make sure you are paying attention
Right.
to what your local meteorologists in particular are telling you, because they do a great job of studying all of this stuff and keeping everything up to par minute by minute, second by second, and they're giving you the most up-to-date information that they have. Trust me, I know it. I've seen it firsthand.
Well, you have the National Hurricane Center, which is located in, I believe, in the metropolitan Miami area. So they definitely track it quite a bit, and don't sell the Weather Channel short and a lot of the other weather outlets that are out there, both nationally and locally. That's what they get paid for. Those guys are meteorologists. I mean, a hurricane is a hurricane. You decide you live in the Sunshine State. You take the beautiful weather and you take the wet weather, and the wet weather become windy weather, and the windy weather become dangerous weather. But that's what we've signed up for, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. I really wouldn't. But we talk about preparing for COVID-19 and going to the store and getting necessary items like toilet paper and whatnot. Do the same thing with hurricanes. Same thing. Proactive versus reactive always works.
And I would really like to believe that many people, especially throughout June, were already preparing for this to take place anyway, because if you've been in Florida a long time, you already know. You're either going to be hit by a hurricane or a huge tropical storm, or you're going to be in danger of being hit by a hurricane or a tropical storm. And it's just best to go ahead and have all the water, all of the canned goods, the peanut butter, all of the necessities, the batteries, the generators, and all of the stuff you're going to need. And it's best to go ahead and start stocking up on that stuff ahead of time, as opposed to trying to stock up on it right when the storms appear to be on their way.
Oh yeah. Again, proactive versus reactive. You're going to go to the store every week. Don't be afraid to grab that jar of peanut butter. Go out there and get some canned goods. Nobody's saying that you have to go ahead, stock your basket at the last minute to get them. Just do it. So what? A few cans a week, you find what you want. There you go. Don't need a can opener. You just go ahead and take the regular ones, right? You don't need an electric can opener. Generators sell a lot during these times. They're expensive, but you know what? You lose power for a period of time, you'd be glad to have them. You really need them. I don't have one, but you know what? I've gotten to the point where I've done enough of these things where a sufficient flashlight, a lantern, and candles. Oh, what about candles? Well, they're good. And you might even find some good smelling candles where they refresh your house and still give you the light.
Now, is there a particular storm or a particular hurricane that you would say in particular was the most dangerous one that you've had to deal with, where you actually remain in your home or remain in the area as the storm was passing through?
Yeah, I would say Wilma was really a tough storm here in Broward County, Florida, the Fort Lauderdale area. Yeah, we lost power for quite a period of time. I don't remember how long, but anytime you lose power for any substantial period of time, it's an uncomfortable situation. Because when you lose power, what do? You lose your air conditioner. When you lose your air conditioner, it gets hot. It really does. So yeah, Hurricane Wilma was a nasty, or I believe that was a Category 5. I don't know off the top of my head, but it was a very dangerous storm for sure. And Hurricane Jeannie and Francis pummeled the Fort Pierce area, the Port St. Lucie area. In fact, I know about those storms all too well because I sold hurricane protection for a local company in Broward County. And I actually ended up renting a hotel room for quite a bit. Nobody wanted to come down from Pompano Beach to go up there, but I said, you know what? They were advertising up there. I might as well go ahead and run all the appointments. And you know what? I helped a lot of people out. And I did make a pretty good living doing it for the period of time that I did. But Hurricane Wilma was a pretty nasty storm. It really was. You do the research, you'll find out it was definitely tough. But South Florida's been hit with Hurricane Andrew before I came here. And Hurricane Andrew leveled Homestead. The Cleveland Indians, once upon a time, were supposed to have a brand new spring training stadium, but that got wiped out. They were forced to reroute over to Winter Haven, Florida. And now the Cleveland Indians are back in Arizona. So, you know, these storms do a lot of damage. They put a lot of time and effort into them. And but I will say the good thing about Hurricane Andrew is they ended up changing a lot of the hurricane and the building codes to what Andrew's standards were. So something good did come out of it. But that here in the Homestead area, it looked like a war zone from what I could tell with the pictures of what people have told me for sure.
Now, let's speak really quickly about the most significant, most recent hurricane that hit Florida, and that was Hurricane Irma in 2017, I believe, or was it 2018?
I believe it was 18. Pretty sure. I don't have the top of my head, but nevertheless, I know about Hurricane Irma all too well.
Okay, how exactly did you prepare for that storm, and did you actually evacuate the area when that storm was taking place?
Yeah, I did. In fact, I came back from my honeymoon, was getting information out in Hawaii. My niece Brooke got married out there, and then we ended up flying from Hawaii all the way here to the Fort Lauderdale area. And then I told Candy, I said, you know what, the storm seems like it's getting a little nasty. So we elected to keep our cats boarded over at the vet. Why not? We didn't have to take them home and put them back. Might as well leave them there. So we ended up putting the panels on there, talked to our sister-in-law up in Nashville, Tennessee, and decided to go up there. Now, bear in mind, we had to decide what vehicle we wanted to take. Rather than take my Jeep up there, we took my wife's Subaru Impreza, which gets a substantially great gas mileage. And you know what? It worked out well. Because at a time where you got to remember, the toughest part about Florida is it's hard to go east and west because of the way our state's set up. So if you're in south, you're going north, and so is everybody else. So what normally should have been a 13-hour drive took the better part of 25, 26 hours to get to my sister-in-law out in Nashville, Tennessee. You know, and it was tough, but here we are. We felt like we were hurricane refugees. I tell you, I did enjoy being up in Tennessee, spending time with family. A little bit nervous about what was going on with my place, but I did keep in touch with my neighbors, and they kept giving me updates as well. So I had that peace of mind going for us there. But yeah, Hurricane Irma was hard. Here's the most interesting part about it. We were on our way up to the Florida Turnpike. Things were bumper to bumper, backtrack, and then decided to go back I-95. And, you know, the rule on that trip was don't go below a half a tank of gas. So I didn't care if you had to go to the gas station 25 or 30 times if need be. We weren't getting below that threshold, and it worked out. But I remember we were taking back roads and not interstate. So to say we saw small town America, yeah, we did. But that's what we had to do, and that was a great decision on our part to do it. Now, the drive back wasn't so bad, but then we were getting the outer bands of the rain, and you know what it's like to get hammered with Mother Nature with the rain. Maybe not to the level that they would have gotten, but we paid attention to what was going on with the national news. You know, everybody's a little bit nervous about these storms. They caused millions and millions of dollars damage. People are homeless. You know, so, yeah, Irma was a pretty tough storm, and thankfully our place, all it did was suffer roof damage, which was subsequently taken care of by the association at my condo.
Yes, and you spoke a little earlier about, you know, having to have a sense of humor and be kind of lighthearted about these situations.
Right.
Because whatever is going to happen is going to happen. And if you live in Florida and you've lived here long enough, you already understand there's a strong possibility that during hurricane season, you're going to get dumped on. it's just a strong possibility. It's just something you have to make sure that you're prepared for.
Right.
And it was around this time last year where I officially knew that I was now living in Florida. I was no longer in Georgia. And despite that Florida and Georgia are connected with each other, directly next to each other, because of how the states are, they couldn't be any more different. I'll share a quick story with you really quickly. I was in Walmart around this time last year, maybe even a week later, right as Hurricane Dorian was becoming a threat to Florida, and it was supposed to hit Florida very hard. Now, thankfully, that ended up not happening, at least for most of Florida anyway. But I was in Walmart. I was collecting my canned goods. I was collecting my batteries. I was getting a new sleeping bag. I was collecting all the new essentials that I needed to collect. And there were people in the store handing out flyers for hurricane parties. And I didn't get that. I didn't understand it at all. I'm just like, we're supposed to get hit by a major storm coming soon. And you're talking about having hurricane parties, like to celebrate this or to welcome the storm in, or like, ooh, what's going on here? And then most of the other people who were in the store who were taking these flyers, you know, they were smiling about it. They were laughing about it like it seemed like a very normal thing to them. And I get it, because like you said, you have to have a sense of humor. You have to be lighthearted about it. And if you've been in the state long enough, you pretty much have probably come to expect things like that. But for me, that was a totally different experience, because I went to college in Savannah, Georgia, at Savannah State University, as you know. And I never exactly directly had to deal with a hurricane as the storm was coming into the area, because the school always did its best to try to get students evacuated away from the campus and the city if you weren't from the city, because there were many students who were from the city, and you just had to go back with your families and you had to deal with that however they were going to deal with it. Maybe you evacuated, maybe you stayed, who knows. But I've always been able to get to safer locations and not necessarily directly have to deal with these storms head on. Now, of course, the situation is different now. I work in the news industry. It's all hands on deck coverage, and you have to be here to help provide that information in the best way possible. But, you know, for me, I haven't directly had to deal with this per se. So that is why that experience I had in a Walmart last year was just different for me. It was the first time I ever heard of anyone wanting to have a hurricane party, because when you look at the news and you just look at how the media puts things out there, when you hear people talk about hurricanes, what mainly comes across is the greatest form of fear possible. And, you know, that's very understandable, especially when you look at the horrific damage that storms like Hurricane Katrina cost in New Orleans in 2005. So you absolutely understand why that's out there. But that was just different for me to see something like that.
Well, I'll bet. In fact, I'm glad you brought up Hurricane Katrina. It originated here in South Florida as a Category 1, so it was a little bit more than just a tropical depression. But as time went on, it got worse, and everybody knows what it did to New Orleans. It certainly put New Orleans underwater. Now, I would later go ahead and cover the New Orleans Bowl between Florida Atlantic University and Memphis, and I ended up taking a tour of my own, per se. I knew where the media hotel was, so I had my GPS always route me back there, rather than, and they were charging a lot of money for those tours. I don't think so. But I ended up seeing a lot of that on my own. It was just unbelievable, the damage. It was almost depressing to see what those people went through. Underwater, losing everything they have. You know, everybody knows that New Orleans is way below sea level. But you talk about getting flattened. Can only imagine if that area gets hit once again and they're underwater, what could happen again? Because I don't think they're completely recovered from Hurricane Katrina. But to think that storm began here in South Florida as a Category 1, and a lot of rain, and it turned out to be the monster that it indeed turned out to be in New Orleans. Oh, goodness.
And when did you cover this New Orleans Bowl?
I want to say 2007, 2008, somewhere around there.
Okay, because my next question for you just involving that was going to be, you know, what was it like to just be in that environment after that storm had taken place, not too long after that, just to be in the Superdome, knowing that there were many people that had to escape to the Superdome during Hurricane Katrina just to feel safe or just to have some form of shelter. And it wasn't necessarily the best place for them to be, but hey, where were most of those people going to go? Because everybody's not fortunate enough to be able to have the financial goods to be able to just up and evacuate and go to a safe area all the way completely away from the storm.
Well,
what was that environment like?
Well, I mean, bear in mind that the New Orleans Superdome got hit pretty well, and there was a lot of damage, and the Saints had to play a lot of their games, on the road. In fact, I remember covering a Saints game out in San Antonio against the Detroit Lions. That was a place where they played a few games as well, and then they had to go to different locations. It wasn't until when they reopened it up that you had the Steve Gleason. Everybody knows about Steve Gleason and all that, for which you end up going out there and celebrating the return of that city on a big level, for sure. So yeah, it was definitely, without a doubt, a release for sure. But it was good. I mean, I enjoyed watching FAU win the bowl game. It was their first bowl win ever, under Howard Schnellenberger and Rusty Smith was the quarterback. So, it was good. I mean, you're right. The word release is what it is. But we're talking about the hurricane overall in general, and it was really tough. But I think what was hard for me is just driving around the neighboring communities and just seeing the damage. I mean, literal damage, and now, and of course, then driving around some of the other areas on Bourbon Street, where even though the area got hit, there were some buildings that were in pretty decent shape as well that survived the storm, but not enough of those stories to tell, just too many of the other ones to tell for sure. But it was definitely enlightening.
Now, let me ask you just this question here really quickly, because you are originally from the state of Michigan, and you've been in Florida for quite some time. So would you rather deal with the ice and the hail and the snowstorms of the north, or would you rather deal with the hurricanes that come with Florida?
Oh, that's a no-brainer. I'll take the hurricanes all day long. Get people to put the shutters up, who cares? You'll find that even during a hurricane, not only you keep your humidity, but you do get sleep as long as the panels are up on the windows. So it's nice and dark in there. So whether I have any sleep medications or not, I always got better sleep when the panels were up, So, don't get me wrong, there's no place that's great during a tough time. Everybody expects snow and ice, and bad weather, gray days up there. But, hurricanes are what they are, But I love living in the South. I have no problem with that.
Now, you spoke to me a little earlier off camera about when you lived in Arizona for about 2 years, you did have to experience a sandstorm as well.
Right.
And even though you said that wasn't nearly as bad as some people may possibly think that it was, just despite what they may hear about them,
right.
Can you just explain to our listeners and our viewers just what exactly can they expect when they go through a sandstorm? Because some people may have heard of that, but they may not exactly know what it is and what to expect.
Yeah, the sincerity of the sandstorm wasn't that bad. It was just a lot of sand flying, hitting your windshield. You just had to get out of the way. And it impaired the roads a lot, is really what it did. Like any water, this time you have sand. You have particles doing the same thing. But I've never seen a sandstorm ever wipe out a house. I've never done that. I mean, it's pretty hard. But is it inconvenience? Does it affect the vision? Yeah, it does. But nothing to the level of this.
Now, let's move on really quickly just to the job that we have seen the Florida government and Florida State administration do here just with the handling of hurricane season thus far, especially in the midst of the pandemic. I believe that they've done a marvelous job so far, just keeping everyone informed and continuing to tell everyone about all the precautions they need to take and doing everything possible to make sure that the state is ready to handle hurricane season while it's also continuing to go through the pandemic. And I bring all of this up because Governor Ron DeSantis and his administration, they've taken a lot of crap for what has happened throughout COVID-19, especially here in the state of Florida. We know in March, the unpredictability of the virus, the unpredictable senses of the virus there, and just being uncertain about everything and no one knowing how things would go. That went on for about a month and a half, and then we started to see things slow down in April. It really slowed down in May all the way to mid-June, and then the cases just rose up in gross-like numbers towards the end of June, all throughout July, and they're finally starting to calm down from a cases number standpoint as we get here towards the end of August. Now, I say from a case standpoint because the death toll number is not looking very encouraging at all.
Right.
But I would like to take this time to educate people on what exactly that means for those who don't know. And this is according to data that comes from the Florida Department of Health on a daily basis. Just because we may receive updates that say that 200, and just use this for an example, 218 new COVID deaths in the state of Florida overnight in the latest COVID-19 update. That does not mean that 218 COVID-19 deaths took place the previous day or even throughout the course of the week.
Right.
Sometimes the Florida Department of Health, they don't get these death reports that come in until much later on. It's very hard for me to explain because it's hard for me when I have to write this stuff up anyway, just trying to figure out this data, figure out these numbers, figure out where all of this is coming from. But, you know, you roll with the punches of what it is that the FDOH and the FDOH dashboard give you so that you can provide the most up-to-date information according to the data that you are receiving from the Florida Department of Health. But the best way I can sum this up and simplify it for everyone, the death numbers that you're seeing on a daily basis, they may not have necessarily taken place throughout the previous 24 hours or throughout the previous week. And in some cases, maybe not even during that month.
Right.
You know, if that makes sense to everyone out there.
Right. Well, the reality of this situation is this, Xavier. In Florida, we're pros at dealing with hurricanes. We are. Been doing it for until the end of time. You know, we're not pros, any of us, at dealing with COVID-19. Period. I mean, it's a new virus. We're waiting for a vaccine. And more importantly, nobody, if they don't mask up, okay, you got a problem. If you don't social distance, you got a problem. If you don't use your common sense, you got a problem. It's called self-destructive if you really want to play the COVID-19, no matter what we try to do. So the reality of the whole situation is this. Okay, well, you can prepare for a storm. You can't prepare for stupidity. Now, I know some friends of mine here in South Florida that had a karaoke business where they had their karaoke gatherings in their backyard. Man, granted, 10, 15, 20 people in the back. The guy's at Holy Cross Hospital, was on a ventilator for a long time. The medical bills are extremely high. Preventative, didn't do it, paying the price. And much less the fact that, you know, we don't know what the long-term residual effects will be on him, let alone anybody that comes down with COVID-19. So while we look at numbers in Florida, whether the substantial cases reported, depending on who you believe them or not, the death toll is what it is. I don't want to hear about the flu or the Spanish flu. Forget that. We're dealing with COVID-19. I was at my eye doctor today having my eyes checked out. Different year. That was the way she described 2020. Of course, we all have lots of ways to describe 2020. Until we get this pandemic licked, every year is going to be different. We're doing these Zoom calls because there's certainly an easier way to communicate with people. And now we've discovered a tool that none of us realized that we had. But the reality of the situation is we are sandwiched between two headaches right now. That's the key. Hurricane, we expect. Pandemic, we did not expect. Period.
And with that being said, because you brought up some points there that we always address here on this show and some of our other platforms here on the WSAN network about people not wearing their masks, people not being vigilant, people gathering in large crowds. I'd like to take this time to give a special kudos, shout out, and thank you to all of those people who are doing those things. Thank you for wearing your mask. Thank you for wearing your gloves. Thank you for helping protect yourself and protect others. Thank you for not gathering in large crowds. Thank you for using your common sense, and thank you for remaining vigilant throughout this time. You know, we don't give those people enough of a pat on the back just for doing the things that they are doing right now to just do right by themselves and do right by others. And I know in society sometimes we have a tendency to say that, well, we're not supposed to give people a round of applause for doing the things they're supposed to do. And in this case, I feel that we should be doing that because we pay so much attention to the things that people are not doing, that we don't give enough credit to the things that some people are doing. There are many people out there who are doing their part, who are wearing their mask, and they are encouraging others to put on a mask and to put on gloves. Don't touch your face, wash your hands, wash your face, don't gather in large crowds, only go out when you need to go get essential things, all of those things. So thank you to all of those people who are doing all of those things.
I'll tell you, I was on a Zoom call with the Miami Marlins today, and Don Mattingly had his team back on the road. Don't forget, they were on the road. A 6-day road trip turned into 23 days. Well, guess what? They're back on the road again, this time with the Washington Nationals. I asked the skipper, Don, okay, been there, done that. You guys are road warriors. How is it different this time than it was before? MLB tightened up the protocols. Now it's hotel, ballpark, nothing in between. Miami Marlins were humbled, as are a lot of teams that are getting humbled by this whole thing. We haven't even begun to see the tip of the iceberg what's going to happen in college football later on. That'll be for another day. But, you know, the Marlins and everybody have had to learn from these problems. Everybody's getting tested up as much as they have to do in order to keep things going. I mean, the NHL bubble has been fantastic. The NBA bubble has been fantastic. But here in the state of Florida, you know, we are dealing with the pandemic and hurricane season. And I reiterate, because this is an educational broadcast, you can prepare for hurricanes, but if you take COVID-19 for granted, you're going to pay a steep price for it. No, believe me, ask the people that passed away, ask the people that are in the hospital, and tell us what not only the immediate effects are, just because you get it once, okay, that what's going to happen. This isn't like the chicken pox. This isn't like the measles. This is COVID-19. This is a lot dangerous animal. I don't know. I wouldn't know how many people have died from the chicken pox or the measles, but I can tell you a whole lot of them have died from COVID-19. And we haven't even begun to hit the tip of the iceberg. What are we in, August? When did things start to shut down? You know, one of my old friends in Detroit, you know, who works for the Fox affiliate, you know, finally went back to the office in the sports department today, August 21st, right? And she hadn't been there since March. Well, you know, for me, if I didn't have my place in my studio, I'd go ballistic. I really would, because I don't think I could stay in the house 24/7. You'd go nuts. Thankfully, I don't have that. But can't say that for everybody else out there. But you're right. I just think that when you take the root of two evils, you've got to be proactive. And that's the whole common denominator, folks. Be proactive. Be proactive to make sure that you prepare for a hurricane, get all the essentials that you need, and then be proactive that with the pandemic that you do the necessary things. Just so you know, you're listening to The Real or Rare. My name is Scott Morganroth. This is Xavier McKnight. Glad to have you with us tonight. We do this broadcast a couple times a month. Xavier and I are looking to do a lot of good things with it. You'll be able to find it on our respective YouTube channels. Xavier, why don't you let everybody know what your YouTube channel is?
Yes, well, you can find me on YouTube just by typing in Xavier McKnight.
And as for us, as the South Florida Tribune has a YouTube channel, I would encourage you to subscribe to it. Let me just, any other pertinent points that you want to get to it before we go ahead and end the broadcast?
Yes, just once again, wanting to just go ahead and remind everyone that as of right now, most of Florida does appear to still be out of the cone zone when it comes down to Tropical Storm Laura. Now, as I said earlier, it's now about an hour and a half now. That was the last time that I looked at those cone zones. So I don't know how the projections are still looking right now. The encouraging thing about that is that throughout the course of the day, it continues to shift farther and farther away from Florida. So maybe by the end of tonight, all of Florida will be out of that zone, or, you know, maybe it makes a shift back in that other direction. We hope and pray it doesn't do that. But I say all of this because I want to remind everyone that just because we're out of the cone zone, we are not out of danger. So please don't get excited and don't celebrate just yet.
Well, now I will tell you this. So one thing about my community, I live in a really, really nice community. And, you know, we didn't have parties. We had a lot. But sometimes you get to know your neighbors pretty good that you never do, because they all come out of the woodwork. Maybe they're all tired of being dark inside of a place with panels on top. And you get to know a lot of them. And then you find it's a unifying force where we're helping each other with the panels, the shutters. You get to shoot the breeze. Everybody's watching out. You know, so you get to know your neighbors a lot more in a situation like this. And I'm never into hurricane parties a whole lot, but meeting your neighbors isn't the worst thing in the world either. And so it's a unifying force is really what it is. So, you know, however, whatever you experience you get out of the whole thing, you get out of it. But you have to just keep your humility and remain proactive no matter what the situation is. That said, Xavier McKnight, we both realize that I like sandwiches, but this is a very interesting sandwich to say the least. Hurricane, pandemic. How you want to go ahead and view that sandwich as anybody's guess, and I'm not going to go out there and paint a picture in your mind. But I will tell you one interesting thing for people with hurricanes that I really find is I do like to have those adrenaline rushes and go to the beach and watch these surfers out in the water, because you almost feel like you're in California or Hawaii watching surfboards, because the water levels are much higher. Now, what I don't like to see are news people on the side of piers ready to get bowled over by the wind and the water, but they get paid to make a living, and that's the visual effect that you have to deal with when you deal with a hurricane situation. The visual images that you get when you look at whether it's people in a hospital bed or a hurricane, they are what they are. Take it for whatever it's worth. Meanwhile, while we have a few more minutes to go on the broadcast, why don't you go ahead and let everybody know how they can get a hold of you, Xavier McKnight?
Yes, you can follow me on Twitter at XTMCKNIGHII. The 2 I's at the end are capitalized. You can follow me on Instagram at XMCKNIGH22. And you can send me a friend request and a follow request on LinkedIn and Facebook just by typing in Xavier McKnight. And you can listen to me more here on the WSAN network on The Real and the Rare, as Scott said earlier. We do this show twice a month. More than likely, it will be on every other Friday. You can listen to more of our episodes here on the WSAN network, and you can also catch me on some of the other programming that we have here too, mostly the Sports Exchange, but sometimes I make my way around to other shows as well.
No doubt about it. And just so you know, folks, not only do we have a visual version, but we also have the audio version. And to find the audio version, please subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, or for that matter, wherever you get your podcasts. So let me go ahead and repeat that again. Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. In terms of our information, you can reach me at Twitter at Tribune South. That's the @ at Tribune South. Facebook, like the South Florida Tribune page. Instagram, you can follow me on Instagram at South Florida Tribune. The YouTube channel I just alluded to moments ago, South Florida Tribune. Our website, www.southfloridatribune.com. You'll find a lot of great content from our media distribution partners, our columnists, as well as the broadcasts. You can email me at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. And you can also find me on LinkedIn, Scott Morganroth. So Xavier McKnight, I got to tell you, it's been a very good, enjoy doing this, and I'm looking forward to being able to do a lot more of these shows. These are fantastic, and I want to make sure that people not only can see who they're listening to, but, we want to make sure that everything that we do, we go out there and do it in the best way. We're here to entertain you, but more importantly, we're here to inform. And we were able to tackle not one, but two important issues. Any closing thoughts, Xavier McKnight?
No, as always, everyone continue to remain vigilant during these times, because as we all know, once again, we're not just dealing with the pandemic right now, we're also dealing with hurricane season. So, be smart, be vigilant, and, use your common sense and take care of yourself, and also help take care of your fellow neighbor as well. We're all in this thing together.
Yeah, we are. And the only thing I'll say in closing is just be proactive and not reactive. Proactive, reactive. Not crisis management. Try to prevent crisis as much as you can. And there are a lot of things that we can control on our own. So on behalf of Xavier McKnight, my name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us on this edition of The Real and the Rare. And until the next time, anything else you want to add, Xavier?
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.